In Ibadan, Nigeria, there lived a young woman named Zuwaira Adebayo. Everyone knew her for her delicious cooking, especially her spicy enkay stew and rich jollof rice. People often gathered around her small kitchen, drawn in by the smell of her food. But life changed when she married Saidu Bakare, a man from Kano in the north. Zuwaira understood that moving to her husband's home meant adjusting to new customs and traditions. She packed her cooking pots and spices with hope in her heart, ready to start a new life. But the welcome wasn't as warm as she expected. From the moment she arrived, things felt tense. Her mother-in-law, Mama Bakare, didn't hide her disapproval. Mama Bakare believed Southern girls like Zuwaira only knew how to cook overly spicy meals. Southern girls only know pepper, Mama Bakare would say loudly, rolling her eyes. Zuwaira said nothing and kept her smile, hoping one day things would change. When Zuwaira gave birth to her first son, Khalil, the family planned a grand naming ceremony. Over 100 guests would attend, and food was a big part of the event. Mama Bakare took charge of the cooking. When Zuwaira offered to help and prepare her signature dishes, Mama Bakare brushed her off. "No need. We don't eat that kind of food here," she said. On the day of the ceremony, while the main dishes were being served, Zuwaira quietly made a small batch of her enkay stew and jollof rice. She placed it on a side table, hoping someone might try it. Mama Bakare noticed and mocked her loudly in front of everyone, saying, "Don't mind my daughter-in-law's food. It's not for serious people." Guests laughed, and Zuwaira felt a sting in her heart. But instead of showing anger, she stayed calm. She watched as curious guests started tasting her food. Slowly, murmurs spread. People began asking, "Who made this rice? Where did this pepper sauce come from?" One by one, guests left the main dishes and gathered around her tray. Even the elders asked for more. By tea. From the first day Zuwaira stepped into her husband's family home in Kano, she felt it. The air was cold, not from the weather, but from the stairs. Her mother-in-law, Mama Bakare, didn't bother to hide her feelings. Her sharp eyes followed Zuwaira's every move. Anytime Zuwaira entered the kitchen or tried to help, Mama Bakare would shake her head, whispering loud enough for others to hear, "Southern girls only know how to cook pepper." The word stung, but Zuwaira didn't let it show. She smiled, choosing silence over argument. Whenever family gathered, Mama Bakare would make comments as if Zuwaira wasn't even there. "We prefer real food here, not all that spice and fire," she'd say, looking directly at her daughter-in-law with a smirk. Zuwaira felt like an outsider in her own home. She wasn't used to these northern customs, but she respected them. Every morning, she would wake early, offer to help in the kitchen, clean the yard, or serve tea to visitors, hoping to earn her place. But Mama Bakare wasn't impressed. Even when neighbors visited and complimented Zuwaira's respectful nature, Mama Bakare would dismiss it. "It's easy to smile. Let's see if she can handle real family matters," she'd reply. Zuwaira's husband, Saidu, tried to comfort her in private. "Give her time," he'd say gently. But each day felt like a quiet battle. Zuwaira didn't complain. Instead, she focused on learning, watching how the family prepared their meals, paying attention to what they liked and what they didn't. Inside, she held on to one thing she knew. Her food could change hearts if only they'd give her a chance. In the evenings, when everyone sat outside, Zuwaira would quietly bring out small snacks she made, placing them on the table without saying a word. Sometimes people tried them, sometimes they didn't. But she never stopped trying. While Mama Bakare kept her distance, Zuwaira believed respect and patience would open the door eventually. No matter how cold the welcome, she stayed. When Zuwaira gave birth to her first son, Khalil, the whole family prepared for a big naming ceremony. It was an important day, and over 100 guests were expected to attend. The house became busy with people moving in and out, carrying chairs, setting up tents, and bringing cooking supplies. The kitchen was the heart of the preparations, filled with pots, spices, and fresh ingredients. Mama Bakare, as usual, took charge of everything. She gave out instructions, telling the other women what to do and how much to cook. Zuwaira stayed close, quietly helping where she could. At one point, Zuwaira gathered her courage and stepped forward. She offered to prepare her special enkay stew and jollof rice, the dishes that had made her popular back in Ibadan. She believed the guests would enjoy something new, something with her own touch. But as soon as she spoke, Mama Becaire turned and gave her a sharp look. In front of everyone, she scoffed and waved her hand. "No need. We don't eat that kind of food here," she said with a dismissive tone that made Zora's heart drop. The other women glanced at each other, some hiding small smiles, others shaking their heads as if Zora had made a mistake by even offering. Feeling embarrassed but not angry, Zora simply nodded and stepped back. She continued helping with other tasks, washing vegetables, stirring soups, carrying trays, all while keeping her thoughts to herself. But deep down, she felt a quiet determination growing. This was her son's special day too, and she wanted to contribute in her own way. While Mama Becaire supervised the large pots and directed the flow of the kitchen, Zora quietly planned her next move. She wasn't going to argue or insist, but she knew she wouldn't let this moment pass without sharing a little piece of her own flavor. Without saying a word, she decided she would prepare a small pot of her signature dishes on the side, just in case someone might be curious enough to try. On the morning of the naming ceremony, the house was full of noise, music, and the scent of different dishes cooking. Everyone moved around, making sure things were perfect for the guests. Zora, though told not to cook, had quietly woken up early. In one corner of the kitchen, she prepared a small batch of her enkay stew and jollof rice. She worked quietly, not drawing attention, using the spices she brought from Abaddon. It wasn't much, just enough to fill one tray. When the time came to serve the food, Zora gently placed her tray on a side table, separate from the large pots prepared by Mama Becaire and the other women. She didn't say a word. Her heart was beating fast, hoping someone might notice her dish. But just as she stepped back, Mama Becaire spotted what she had done. With a loud voice, enough for everyone nearby to hear, Mama Becaire said, "Don't mind my daughter-in-law's food. It's not for serious people." The words cut through the air, and some guests around the table laughed lightly. A few looked at Zora with small, knowing smiles, as if they understood but didn't want to get involved. Zora felt her chest tighten. Her eyes dropped to the floor, but she didn't let her smile fade. She had expected this moment, but it still hurt more than she thought it would. All she wanted was to share a small piece of herself with her new family. Instead, her effort was turned into a public joke. Zora didn't argue. She simply stepped back, hands folded in front of her. She watched as the guests filled their plates with the regular dishes, passing her tray by without a second look. Inside, her heart sank, but her face stayed calm. She reminded herself why she had come here, why she kept trying. Even if no one ate her food, she wouldn't let it break her spirit. Quietly, she stood to the side, waiting and watching, believing that one day, her moment would come. Even after Mama Becaire mocked her in front of everyone, Zora didn't let her face show sadness or anger. She simply smiled, steady and calm. Deep down, she believed her food could speak louder than any words. So, she picked up a serving spoon and joined the other women, helping to dish out the main dishes Mama Becaire had prepared. Her own pot of enkay stew and jollof rice sat quietly in the corner, still warm, untouched, waiting. As she moved between the tables, Zora noticed something. A few guests, while waiting for their plates, glanced at her side tray. One man, curious, stepped away from the line and scooped a little of her enkay stew onto his plate. He tasted it with a thoughtful look. Another guest, a young woman, followed, taking a spoonful of rice. No one said anything yet, but Zora saw them nodding quietly as they chewed. The whispers started slowly. Someone leaned in to another and asked, "Who made that pepper stew?" Another voice answered softly, "It's the daughter-in-law's food." Zora heard it but pretended not to. She kept her focus on serving. Her heart beat a little faster, but her hands stayed steady. She didn't rush over to her tray or point it out. She let curiosity do the work. By now, a few more guests had drifted towards her pot. Some were dipping bread into the stew, others scooping more rice onto their plates. The regular dishes were good, but there was something different about Zora's food, something that made people want another taste. She could feel the shift happening, slowly but surely. Still, Zora didn't brag or draw attention to herself. She kept her head high, her movements graceful, as if nothing unusual was happening. Her quiet patience was paying off. Without forcing it, her food was starting to win hearts on its own. Each person that tasted it seemed to go back for more, pulling others along with them. And through it all, Zuwaira just kept smiling. As the feast continued, something unexpected began to happen. The air filled with quiet murmurs. Guests who had taken just a small spoon of Zuwaira's ayame stew and jollof rice started whispering to each other. "Where did this pepper sauce come from?" one man asked, looking around. "Who made this rice?" "It's delicious," said another woman, her plate already half empty. One by one, more people drifted toward the side table where Zuwaira's food sat. They left behind the large trays of the regular dishes and gathered around her small pot. Spoons clinked against plates as they served themselves more, eyes lighting up with surprise after each bite. At first, it was just the younger guests, but soon even the elders, the ones known for being very particular about food, took notice. A respected old man set down his cup of tea and slowly walked over. Without saying a word, he tasted Zuwaira's stew. He paused, looking thoughtful, then gave a small nod of approval. That one nod was all it took. Now, even the most traditional guests wanted to try. Zuwaira stood quietly at a distance, watching all this unfold. Her heart raced, but she kept her calm. Felt like a small miracle. The same food that had been mocked just an hour earlier was now the center of attention. Guests were leaving the main dishes untouched, focusing only on what she had cooked. Voices grew louder. People were asking each other, "Who prepared this?" Some pointed toward Zuwaira, their faces showing new respect. Mama Bakir noticed too. Her eyes followed the crowd, her expression slowly changing from surprise to something softer. Zuwaira didn't rush to the front or make a scene. She let everyone enjoy her food without saying a word. The same patience she had shown earlier was now bringing her quiet victory. Her food had spoken for her, louder than any argument ever could. The twist at the feast was clear. The ignored dish had become the star of the celebration. By the end of the day, something happened no one expected. After watching so many guests go back for second and third helpings of Zuwaira's food, even Mama Bakir couldn't ignore it anymore. Her proud face softened as she slowly walked over to the side table where the nearly empty pot of ayame stew sat. The once full tray of jollof rice was almost finished too. Everyone noticed her, but no one said a word. With quiet curiosity, Mama Bakir picked up a spoon and tasted just a little. The moment the flavors touched her tongue, her expression changed. Her eyes, once filled with doubt, now held surprise. She looked at Zuwaira, standing quietly nearby, and asked in a calmer, almost gentle voice, "Zuwaira, what spices did you use?" Zuwaira didn't show off or say too much. She just smiled softly and replied, "Just a little Ibadan touch, Mama." Her voice was steady, her heart full. The same mother-in-law who once mocked her food was now asking questions. It felt like a small but powerful victory. But it wasn't just Mama Bakir. Guests crowded around, plates in hand, asking Zuwaira for her recipe. Some held their phones out, wanting to record her explaining it. Others brought out notepads, writing down every ingredient she mentioned. They kept repeating how they had never tasted stew so rich or rice so flavorful. Some even said, "Please, you must open a restaurant." Zuwaira stayed humble, answering their questions with a calm and happy heart. She didn't brag or act proud. She simply shared her love for cooking and the special spices from her hometown. What started as a quiet act of hope had now turned into something much bigger. Even the elders, who had been so strict before, gave her nods of approval. Mama Bakir stood beside her, now looking at her daughter-in-law with new eyes. That simple spoonful had changed everything. It wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about respect, acceptance, and a new beginning. Zuwaira had found her place through her cooking. After the feast, just as the sun was setting and guests were preparing to leave, a quiet message came through the crowd. The village chief, Oba Yusuf, wanted to see Zuwaira personally. People whispered and stepped aside as she was guided to where the chief sat under a shaded canopy, surrounded by elders. Her heart raced, but she kept her head held high. She had no idea what he would say. Oba Yusuf looked at her with calm, serious eyes, then spoke in a steady voice that everyone could hear. "Zuwaira," he said, "your food brought unity today. People from different families and places sat together, smiling, all because of the taste you shared. Keep sharing your gift." His words were simple, but they carried great weight. The elders sitting beside him nodded in agreement. Some of them even smiled, which was rare. In that moment, Zuwaira felt something shift deep inside her. It wasn't just about cooking anymore. It was about bringing people together, making them feel at home no matter where they came from. From that day on, people in the village and beyond started calling her Mama Khalil the cook, honoring both her son and her talent. Wherever she went, people would greet her with respect, asking for her dishes and her secret recipes. Children in the neighborhood would run up, hoping for a spoonful of her famous enkay stew. Even Mama Bakr introduced her with pride now, no longer with the old sharpness in her voice. Zuwaira stayed humble, always remembering how things had started, quietly, with a single tray placed on a side table. Now, her name carried meaning. People didn't just remember the food, they remembered how it made them feel. Zuwaira's quiet patience and steady kindness had opened hearts. It wasn't through arguments or loud words, but through the simple, unforgettable taste of her food. Her story became one people told at family gatherings and community events, a story of respect earned, not given, all through the power of a meal shared. After the naming ceremony, Zuwaira's life slowly began to change. Everywhere she went, people talked about her food. Family members and neighbors would stop by the house just to ask if she had made her special enkay stew or jollof rice. Some even brought their own empty containers, hoping to take some home. With so many people asking, Saidu, her husband, suggested she turn her cooking into a business. At first, Zuwaira wasn't sure, but after more encouragement from everyone around her, she agreed. With Saidu's support, they opened a small restaurant in Kano and named it Ibadan Flavors, to honor Zuwaira's hometown. The sign was simple, but word spread fast. On the first day, neighbors, friends, and even strangers showed up, lining up outside. People ordered plate after plate of her jollof rice and enkay stew. By the end of the week, her food wasn't just famous in their neighborhood, it was being talked about across the region. Soon, Zuwaira's little restaurant became a known spot. Travelers passing through Kano would ask for directions to Ibadan Flavors. Some came just to taste the rice they had heard about from others. There were always people sitting outside, waiting for their turn to eat. What surprised everyone even more was seeing Mama Bakr in the kitchen, working alongside Zuwaira. The same woman who once rolled her eyes at Zuwaira's food now helped serve it proudly. Whenever a customer complimented the taste, Mama Bakr would smile and say, "That's my daughter-in-law's recipe." Her voice no longer carried any sharpness, only pride. The restaurant wasn't just about food anymore. It became a place where people gathered, where families shared meals and stories. Zuwaira stayed humble, always wearing her simple apron, stirring her pots with the same care as she did back at the naming ceremony. Her quiet determination had turned into a business that fed not just stomachs, but also hearts. People didn't just come for the spices, they came for the feeling. Years later, on the day of Khalil's school graduation, Zuwaira stood quietly, watching her son walk across the stage. As his name was called, her eyes filled with pride. But it wasn't just Khalil's success that made her emotional. As she looked around the hall, she saw her entire family gathered. Her husband Saidu, Mama Bakr, relatives from both Kano and Ibadan, all sitting together, smiling and clapping for Khalil. It was a moment Zuwaira once never imagined. Back then, when she first arrived in her husband's home, things had been so different. Her food was mocked, her presence doubted. But now it was clear she had earned her place, not through loud words, but through patience, kindness, and her cooking. After the ceremony, as family members gathered for pictures, people spoke to Zuwaira with warmth and respect. Some still mentioned her restaurant, Ibadan Flavors, sharing stories of how her dishes had become their favorites. Even Mama Bakr stood proudly by her side, holding Khalil's hand, introducing Zuwaira to others as her daughter-in-law with pride in her voice. Children ran around with plates of jollof rice from the small food stand set up outside. Guests whispered and smiled, saying, "That's Mama Khalil's food." Zuwaira didn't need to say much. Her quiet smile said everything. She had built more than a restaurant. She had built trust, respect, and love within the family and community. Her story, once just a quiet moment at a naming ceremony, had become something people told over and over. How the mother-in-law once mocked her food, calling it unsuitable, and how that same food had brought everyone together. People would always say, her mother-in-law mocked her food at the naming ceremony until the guests asked for her recipe. That sentence followed Zuwaira everywhere now, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that patience, kindness, and true talent always find their place. Zuwaira stood there, holding Saidu's hand, fully part of the family's